This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Chamber. Did you know that you can watch the Senate live on YouTube? Visit the channel by browsing to youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. That's youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Chamber. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Chamber. Did you know that you can watch the Senate live on YouTube? Visit the channel by browsing to youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. That's youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Chamber. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Chamber. Did you know that you can watch the Senate live on YouTube? Visit the channel by browsing to youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. That's youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Chamber. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Chamber. Did you know that you can watch the Senate live on YouTube? Visit the channel by browsing to youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. That's youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Chamber. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Chamber. Did you know that you can watch the Senate live on YouTube? Visit the channel by browsing to youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. That's youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Chamber. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Chamber. Did you know that you can watch the Senate live on YouTube? Visit the channel by browsing to youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. That's youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Chamber. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Chamber.
The Senate will come to order. The senators will take their seats. Those persons not entitled to the privileges of the floor will please retire to the gallery. Good morning, senators. I neglected to say that yesterday. I'd gotten a little rusty, so good morning to you. So good to see you. The senators and all in attendance, if you are able, please rise. We will be led in prayer this morning by the Reverend H. Carson Rhine, Jr. of Union Presbytery Seminary in Richmond. Following the prayer, if everyone will please remain standing, and we will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by our very own Lauren Howard, Journal Assistant in the Senate Clerk's Office.
Let us pray. Great God of creation, we pause to give you thanks. Thanks for the 237 years as the Commonwealth of Virginia, being privileged today to be standing upon the broad shoulders of men and women who have laid our solid foundation. Yet we also stand today in a world of conflict and confusion, a world unclear of its direction and its future. So, O God, give to the leaders gathered here this day the wisdom to move the Commonwealth forward in a positive and collegial fashion. Allow all our conversations and debates to be civil in their discourse and intention. Allow all members to be willing to listen even when not in agreement. Allow all to be reminded of whom they serve while working in this chamber. And may we heed the tried and true words of an old prayer. Grant today, O God, to each senator the serenity to accept the things they cannot change. Grant today, O God, to each senator the serenity to have the courage to change the things they can change. And then grant today, O God, to each senator the serenity to have the wisdom to know the difference. May that be our prayer, and may this prayer glorify our God. Amen. Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The clerk will call the roll. All those present, please vote aye. The clerk will close the roll.
You have a quorum, Madam President. Senate Journal for Monday, October 27th, 2025.
The senator from Hanover, Senator McDougal, moves that the reading of the journal be waived. All in favor of waiving the reading of the journal will record their votes aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Does any senator desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 18, no 17.
Ayes 18, no 17. The reading of the journal is waived. The clerk will report any communications from the House of Delegates.
I do not have any, Madam President.
The clerk will report any communications from the governor.
Dear Senators, I am disappointed to see the General Assembly reconvening this week to ram through a constitutional amendment.
Madam President,
For what purpose does the senator from Eastern Fairfax County rise?
I'd move to waive reading of the communication by the governor.
The question is, shall the reading of the communication from the governor be waived? Those in favor of waiving the reading of the communication from the governor will record their votes aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Does any senator desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 19, no 16.
Ayes 19, no 16. The reading of the communication from the governor is waived. We have arrived again at the time in our morning hour when we will recognize our visitors. The normal procedure is that your senator will rise and recognize you, and then if you will hold your applause, I will recognize you on behalf of the senators. At this time, I do now call upon the senator from Lynchburg, Senator Peake.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise to introduce a guest.
The senator may continue.
Thank you, Madam President. Today, in the gallery, we have my neighbor from 3 houses down the street who happens to be in the gallery today, Mr. Charlie Schindler. And to show the diversity of our neighborhood, Mr. Schindler works for Abigail Spanberger. And I believe Madam President is very familiar with Mr. Schindler, but I would like to welcome him to the Capitol today. Thank you, Madam President.
Please continue to rise, Mr. Schindler. I know you affectionately as Charlie because you are with me on every stop, making sure and no, you have to keep standing, sir. It's my time now. But we've grown so accustomed to you that we offer you water when it's hot and tea when it's cold. But you do remind us that this is the America that we have, and we must have the ability to talk with each other and protest each other. And so I'm grateful to see you. Thank you for coming. Senators, let us give him the warm welcome of his Senate. The senator from Franklin County, Senator Stanley.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you, Madam President. May the Senate Journal reflect that my good friend and seatmate, the senator from Spotsylvania, is away on pressing personal business.
I thank the senator. The Journal will so note. The senator from Colonial Heights, Senator Sturdivant.
Madam President, I'd ask that the Journal reflect that my seatmate, the senior senator from Virginia Beach, reflect that he is away from the Capitol on pressing personal business.
Thank you, Senator. The Journal will so reflect. The senator from Northern Fairfax County, Senator Boysko.
Thank you, Madam President. I ask that the Journal reflect that my seatmate, the senior senator from Chesterfield, is away on pressing and personal business.
Thank the senator. The journal will again so reflect. The senator from Eastern Henrico, Senator Ayers.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that the journal reflect that my seatmate, the gentleman from Henrico, the senior senator from Henrico, is away on personal pressing business.
Again, Senator, thank you. The journal will so reflect. The senator from Lynchburg, Senator Peake.
Thank you, Madam President. I would ask that the journal reflect that my good friend and seatmate, the senator from Botetourt, who was here yesterday, today is away on pressing personal business.
Thank you, Senator. The journal will reflect that as well. Resolutions, petitions, and bills are in order. Hearing none, the clerk will call the calendar.
Tuesday, October 28, 2025. Regular calendar, House Joint Resolution on second reading. House Joint Resolution 606 relating to the scope of business that may come before the 2024 special session as session 1 of the General Assembly of Virginia.
Chair calls on the senator from Eastern Fairfax County, Senator Surville.
Good morning, Madam President.
Good morning.
Madam President, I move the memorial resolutions on pages 1 through 2, SR 694 to SR 700, be considered in a block in their usual manner, waiving the reading of the resolutions thereof with the understanding that any senator desiring to remove a resolution from the block will do so after the clerk has read the number of the resolution.
The question is, shall the memorial resolution on page 1 and 2, Senate Resolution 694 through Senate Resolution 700, be considered in the block in the usual manner, waiving the reading of the resolution thereof with the understanding that any senator desiring a resolution to be removed from the block will do so after the clerk has read the title of the resolution. All in favor of that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. The resolutions are before us in the block. The clerk will now read the title of the resolutions.
Senate Resolution 694, celebrating the life of Candis Gabriella King. Senate Resolution 698, celebrating the life of James Richard Damaré. Senate Resolution 700, celebrating the life of Jane Kemp Strauss.
Madam President.
For what purpose does the senator from Northern Fairfax County rise?
May I ask that SR 700 be taken out of the block and by for the day so we can get some more signatures on that one?
Without objection, Senate Resolution 700 is out of the block and by for the day.
Senate Resolution 700, celebrating, I'm sorry, that was out of the block.
With the exception of Senate Resolution 700, which is out of the block and by for the day, the resolutions will be agreed to in the usual manner. All those in favor of agreeing to the memorial resolutions, please rise. The resolutions are agreed to. The Senate will stand at. We don't have to. Okay. Is there any other business to come before the Senate? The senator from Eastern Enrico, Senator Ayers.
Thank you, Madam President. I am hoping we can return to the first morning hour for the purposes of an introduction.
The senator may continue.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, today's invocation was given by the Reverend H. Carson Rhine, retired of the General Presbyterian and Stated Clerk Presbytery, of the James Union Presbyterian Seminary. And we're so grateful that he was able to make it in this morning and offer us such a beautiful prayer and genuine calming start to our morning. And so I just hope that it would be the pleasure of this body to give him a warm Senate welcome.
Thank you, Senator. Indeed. Reverend, please rise, as you know is our custom. We're so grateful that you have come and honored our body. We are no strangers to you and you to us. And I think these 18 times, I believe, is what you have done as your duty in bringing us into remembering. So thank you. Thank you for all that you do in the community and that you have done for us as well. Senators, please let us give Reverend Rhine the warm welcome of his Senate. The senior senator from Prince William, Senator McPike.
Thank you, Madam President. Rise for the point of personal privilege.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Today we passed SR 694, celebrating the life of Candis Gabriella King, and wanted just to take a moment of sincere appreciation for those who reached out to Delegate King and her family of the loss of her 15-year-old Queen, as her nickname is. But what an absolutely beautiful life of a kid. The tributes at her funeral were just astounding, from the choir, her high school friends coming to share stories. And one of the key things also that was stated during the service was the joint commitment to sickle cell disease. For those that don't know, sickle cell is a disease that predominantly impacts the Black community. Over 90% are impacted there, and an incredibly painful, horrible disease. Having the unfortunate opportunity to treat people in the field going through sickle cell crisis, it is absolutely excruciating to watch someone go through the amount of pain. Queen did that with such grace throughout her life that part of the family's request is that we commit ourselves to sickle cell and we elevate what it means and how we can tackle this together. And unfortunately, recent federal cuts also cut sickle cell research. And part of those also, unfortunately, and I don't want to politicize it, but cited DEIist divisiveness in those cuts. And I don't know what algorithm or whatever cuts were happening at the federal government, but these are real people. These are kids in our community, and it impacts people's lives. And so I'm hoping folks can be a voice and a message to DC and other places to tackle this horrible, horrible disease that takes young women like Candis out of this world when they should be thriving, and we should have a cure. So thank you, Madam President.
The senator from Franklin County, Senator Stanley.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
The senator has the floor.
Madam President, thank you, and thank you to the members of the body for hearing me out here. As I have now completed, I thought I completed my 15th year here in the State Senate. I must thank certain people that taught me, as I matured over the years, how we do things here in this body. First and foremost, Madam Clerk, who has been like a mother to me here, sometimes with a ruler to hit me on the head or the hand, but also to show me and to demonstrate to me how important it is where we sit, what a privilege it is where we are, and why we are here. I'm reminded, now that I've finished that 15th year almost, going into my 16th year in this body, and as our years come to an end, our terms come to an end, we all must realize that we will never be here forever. But there have been great Virginians who have come before us. Great Virginians who I had the privilege of serving with, like Senator Y.B. Miller, Senator Chuck Colgan, Senator Dick Saslaw, icons, Walter Stosh, my personal favorite, my hero, Senator Henry Marsh, one of my best friends who we lost too soon, Senator Don McEachin. Taught me a lot about the Senate, including Madam Clerk, that sometimes we must overcome our partisan desires when they fill our hearts with anger, and that we must do what is right for the Commonwealth of Virginia as a whole, not just the districts that we serve, but the state in its entirety. You know, Dick Saslaw used to say, and I might imitate him, you know, Stanley, and he used to call me the senator from Dogpatch, which I took as a compliment. He'd say, you know, Stanley, we all have in our mind a belief in what's right for Virginia, just maybe different paths to get there. But in the end, we end up at the same place. Never forgot that. I still don't forget that. And that what we are about to demonstrate here as we go through the machinations of what is before us, my fear is that we lose the collegiality, the friendships that we have, the relationships that we've established, to do that which is a partisan thing rather than to do, as Saslaw would say, what is right for the Commonwealth of Virginia, or what Chuck Colgan would admonish us again to do, which to do the right thing and not break down into partisanship and bickering. There are partisan issues. But I remember also, too, where Chuck Colgan used to say, don't let what's happening in Washington bleed across the Potomac into us. We're different. We're the Commonwealth of Virginia. We're where freedom began in these United States, where most of our founding fathers came from. And so I remember them as I drove back up here thinking, why am I here? What am I doing? Is it for the best, for the people that I serve, but also for the Commonwealth? We stand at a crossroads, and I believe it's time we address an uncomfortable question. What has happened to our redistricting reform commitments? 4 years ago, Democrats and Republicans stood together in this chamber. We passed a bipartisan constitutional amendment, not for political convenience, but because we believed it was right. We looked Virginia voters in the eye and promised them something fundamental, that Virginia would pick their representatives and not the other way around, as one of our great senators stated in public. We passed that amendment with conviction, and then we proved it worked. Permit me to remind us why we did this. For over 2 centuries, since Patrick Henry's gerrymander of James Madison in 1789, Virginia's legislative districts have been drawn to advantage whichever party held the pen. In the 2010s, and I was a victim of it in 2010, 2011, whoever had the power used it. In 2011, we managed a bipartisan gerrymander that produced a 100% reelection rate from 2015. That, my friends, is not democracy. That, my friends, is the opposite of democracy. We documented racial gerrymandering. We litigated partisan gerrymandering. Federal courts have ruled previously that our maps here in the Commonwealth of Virginia were unconstitutional. And then we did something different. We listened. We listened to our voters. We listened to Virginians who were tired of the gerrymandering. In 2019, polls showed 70% of Virginians supported redistricting reform. Not 51%, not 55%, 70%. The Mason-Dixon poll showed 72% support. And crucially, over 60% of Republicans and Democrats alike supported this amendment equally when it came to a vote in the Commonwealth. This was not partisan. This was Virginia. Unlike most every other state, we created something unique, a hybrid commission, 16 members, half legislators, half citizens. We didn't push the process entirely away from this General Assembly, but we brought citizens in to ensure accountability and balance. We trusted each other. We trusted the process, and it worked. The results speak for themselves. The electoral landscape changed dramatically. Close races became the norm in the Commonwealth, not the exception. Competitiveness increased because fairness increased. Princeton Gerrymandering Project analyzed the remedial map in 2019 and found when the racial gerrymandering was undone by us in the future, by the courts and then by the commission, partisan competitiveness increased dramatically. In 2019, 8 affected House districts fell within the competitive 45 to 55% range. 2017, only 4 did. The difference, the mean median difference, dropped from 3% to 0.1%, essentially eliminating that partisan advantage. If we look at what the commission did, and I sat on that commission and came down here every day, like every citizen did, deliberately, for that reason, we locked up. It was a tie, and it went as it was planned by enacting legislation to the Supreme Court. And nonpartisan map drawers drew maps which, if you look at them right now, accurately reflect what the polls tell us about how Virginia is. 51-49, 21-19, 6-5. I don't know how anybody can say that they did a poor job. Basically, what we have eliminated is this partisan advantage. Not a Republican advantage, not a Democrat advantage, a Virginia advantage. Yet now, I'll be honest with you, I'm hearing whispers that the reason I'm here is to revisit that constitutional amendment that was passed so overwhelmingly. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But somebody told me that's why we're here. And so what I'm hearing is that somehow the suggestions are that this process that we passed, that we worked so hard on, and that the people passed, is now inconvenient now that one party holds the majority over the other. Questions now are about the Supreme Court fallback mechanism suddenly being unacceptable. Let me be clear. This mechanism exists in other states. All function without controversy. None of them are trying to repeal the constitutional amendment for a redistricting commission. All of them. And what we passed in the redistricting commission is constitutional. And it is good. Now, right now, other states are watching us. Princeton report noted that Virginia's model can be a model for other states where legislatures must be involved. What message do we send to them, to the United States, and to the people that vote for us if we walk away now? We send messages like redistricting reform is only popular when you're in power. We send messages like bipartisan principles dissolve when partisan advantages present themselves. Madam President, I don't believe that's who we are. And quite frankly, I don't think that that's how Madam Clerk raised me and others in this chamber to be. We respect the voter. We respect the process. We respect our Constitution, even when it doesn't serve our partisan advantage or our partisan point. If you want to change how we pick, then go back in January and do it with the enabling legislation. Amend that. Why are we attacking a constitutional amendment that is merely 5 years old and has only been used once. What we should not do is abandon this commitment just because the circumstances in Washington have changed. Madam President, Madam Clerk, I came to this chamber 15 years ago believing in something. I believed Virginia could be different. I believed Virginia was different from the rest of the United States. I believed that we could trust voters more than ourselves. I believed a commission of citizens and legislators could draw maps fairly and transparently. And we told Virginia voters we meant it. 70% of them believed us. 60% voted for it. Let's honor the commitment that this body made when it passed the resolution for redistricting reform and the creation of that commission. Let's strengthen the tools that we've created, not destroy them and break them down. Let's prove that Virginia and the nation, that we can put principles ahead of partisanship. Madam President, members of the body, my friends, the eyes of the nation are upon us. Let's not blink. Let's not be rash. Let's not do something that when we leave this chamber, because no matter how long you're here, you're not here forever, that we've left the next generation to deal with in a way that hurts the Commonwealth of Virginia, does not help it. It hurts the citizens because we're choosing party over patriots and citizens that we represent. Let us all do the Virginia way thing that Walter Stosh, Chuck Colgan, Y.B. Miller, Don McEachin, who would be here, and as partisan as Don McEachin can be, I would think he would say, yeah, I don't know. Ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to serve with you. And I ask that we don't make this mistake based on a rash, emotional feeling that we're having right now because of Washington, D.C. And I thank you, Madam President.
The senator from Rockingham, Senator Obenshain.
Rockingham.
Your microphone, Senator.
Madam President, I rise for a point of personal privilege.
The senator may say on.
Thank you. You know, I've been here for even longer than the senator from Franklin County. I've been here with Republican governors and Democratic governors. I've heard and seen governors send messages to the General Assembly. Never that I can recall did we ever refuse to hear the message that was delivered from one of our governors. We've got on our desk a message from our current governor, Governor Youngkin, and while the contents of it may not be something that everybody wants to hear, I would respectfully submit that we owe the governor the respect of at least listening to what the governor has to say. On our desk is this message. Dear Senators, I'm disappointed to see the General Assembly reconvening this week to ram through a constitutional amendment on redistricting only 7 days before the close of our 2025 statewide and House of Delegates elections. And with over 1 million voters already having cast their ballots, there's nothing more shameless than an 11th hour political power grab and attempt to distract voters from the issues in the current election. Those issues are about character. And while I'm extremely disappointed, I'm not at all surprised that House and Senate Democratic leadership would pursue this action to thwart the will of the voters on behalf of national Democratic organizations that have made hundreds of thousands of dollars in contributions to support redistricting in Virginia. Instead, this week's session will waste hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars on a pay-for-play power grab and will undermine the will of the voters who just 5 years ago overwhelmingly voted 2-1 to codify independent redistricting into our Constitution. Instead of engaging in this shameless exercise, the House and Senate Democratic leadership should work on bipartisan basis with the entire General Assembly to serve their constituents here in Virginia by acting on common priorities. There are many issues that deserve our shared attention. Last week, I declared a state of emergency to ensure that needy Virginians can access healthy food and do not go hungry as a result of the Democratic shutdown in Washington. Power bills remain too high due to the Virginia Clean Economy Act, a fact repeatedly acknowledged by the Speaker. Successful efforts like Ceasefire Virginia are battling back against gang violence. But some cities are refusing to partner with federal law enforcement agencies on their critical public safety operations. Federal guidance on protecting women and girls from sexual predators in intimate, legitimately separated spaces is being ignored by local jurisdictions. But instead of working together to solve any of those urgent issues, House and Senate Democrats are focused on playing partisan games, wasting time, energy, and taxpayer dollars. Only 5 years ago, 2/3 of Virginians spoke loud and clear when they voted to codify independent redistricting into our state's constitution. This week's reconvening is an attempt to subvert the will of the voters who thoughtfully considered and overwhelmingly voted to remove this very same politics from our redistricting process. More egregious is the recent news that the National Democratic Redistricting Committee gave House Democratic Caucus and the Democratic candidate for governor $300,000 for this effort on the eve of leadership calling back the General Assembly. I'm confident that Virginians will see through this shameless pay-to-play stunt. Respectfully, Glenn Youngkin. Madam President, I thank you.
The senator from Alexandria, Senator Eben.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
The senator may continue.
Briefly, I just have a slightly different view of the divisive communique placed on our desks that misspells the name of one of the major political parties at least 4 times. This letter is an attempt by the governor to inject himself into a process in which he is constitutionally and practically and politically irrelevant. He makes a lot of charges in here that I'm not going to go through one by one, but he talks about undermining the will of the voters, potentially giving the voters a choice to revisit their past decision in a small way under extraordinary circumstances undermines no one. Thank you.
Is there any other business to come before Senator Locke, the senator from Hampton?
Thank you, Madam President. A point of personal privilege.
The senator has the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I only request to speak because I was sitting here pondering that I obviously sat on a different bipartisan commission than the senator from Franklin because it was anything but bipartisan. Yes, there were 8 Republicans, and yes, there were 8 Democrats, citizens and legislators. But that is the reason why the Supreme Court ended up drawing lines, because the Supreme Court was supposed to be the exception, not the rule. There was constant gridlock, and partisan roadblocks were the reasons why the Supreme Court ended up drawing the lines. Because the commission ended up discussing things as tedious as which university could be trusted to provide unbiased data, because the discussion was around who could conduct a study that would actually be trusted, because one university was proposed, but the Republican side of the House said, no, we couldn't use that university because they had conducted a study on redlining, and that the redlining showed that, the study showed that redlining actually disadvantaged African Americans. So no, we couldn't trust that university to do the study on data for drawing maps. But what's more interesting to me here is that we have not heard anything from our colleagues on the voter repression and mid-decade rigged districting taking place across this nation, in Texas, in Missouri, in North Carolina, on orders from on high. Mum's the word, as efforts are made to rig district maps in red states to crack, pack, and in many instances, completely eliminate Black and brown districts across this country in an effort to cheat the numbers in Congress. That is not what's being proposed here. There are no maps, no proposal to dissolve the commission or anything else. What's being proposed is an effort to provide flexibility for the future, and voters will have a voice in what's being proposed. They will vote in referendum on whatever is proposed. At the end of the day, it will be the voters' decision on whatever comes out of this special session. Thank you, Madam President.
The senator from Eastern Fairfax County, Senator Surville.
Thank you, Madam President. A point of personal privilege.
The senator may continue.
Thank you, Madam President. You know, I was happy to move to waive the reading of the communication we received today. When it was placed on my desk, I quickly skimmed it. And I've never seen anything on the letterhead of the Commonwealth that was so blatantly partisan and political handed me before. It is one, it should have been written on campaign letterhead. It shouldn't have been on the Office of the Governor's letterhead. And I think the tone and the words and the comments put in there undermine this governor's authority and the institution of the governor itself. This governor, by the way, who I found to be probably the most partisan governor in the history of our Commonwealth. From day one, he ran as if he was campaigning, not as if he was governing or trying to represent everybody in the state. How many times did he veto bills? Does anybody remember? 399 vetoes. That's more than triple any other governor in the history of our Commonwealth. Any other. By the way, has anybody down here ever gotten a call as to try and work something out with that office? I'm just curious. This office, from the very beginning, has not tried to work across the aisle, not tried to work with us on anything, except for, I guess, a sports dome. Other than that, this office is governed for one purpose, trying to become president, and that's it. And I don't feel like this body needs to listen to anything he has to say. He's a lame duck now, he's not relevant, and he's not involved in this process. Article 4, Section 7 says we get to decide our process, not him, and we don't have to listen to what he has to say. Especially when he decides, he can't even figure out the difference between a noun and an adverb, when he repeatedly, as the senator from Alexandria pointed out, can't even figure out the correct name of our political party. Now, with regard to what's going on more broadly, you know, our country is suffering from some really big problems right now. We have somebody across the river who basically thought he got elected king. We have somebody who ignores the rule of law on a regular basis. We have someone who basically doesn't pay attention to the restrictions of the United States Constitution. We have a president who's been sued more times in the last 6 months than any president's probably been. Most other presidents have been sued in their entire term, some for even 8 years. Corruption is unabound. We have a president right now where you can go and buy some of his meme coin if you want him to do something. And that money goes right to his pocket. And I haven't heard a word, not a word from anybody in the minority, not only just in this chamber or the other chamber or in this entire country, criticizing the abuses of power that are going on right now because everybody on the other side is so terrified that if they dare to speak out against their dear leader, it's going to cause them some kind of problem at home. What I care about is our country. And what this caucus cares about is our country and the rule of law. Our state, by the way, our state in June of 1776 declared its independence from this exact kind of tyranny. This body was created to fight that kind of tyranny. We have a duty and responsibility to stand up when democracy is not being protected in this country. I want my children to have the same democracy I do, that I've been able to enjoy for the last 54 years. That my parents, my grandparents, the 13th generations of Virginians that came before me fought to create and not be destroyed. We used to have a Supreme Court that would stand up for political minorities and defend the minority. This Supreme Court has zero interest in doing anything of the kind. Normally, we have checks and balances in our system that protect against the kinds of abuses of power that we see. They're completely gone. And instead, we have 26 United States senators who represent fewer people than Northern Virginia, coupled with the United States Congress, which, by the way, the president just declared himself the speaker 2 days ago. I didn't hear a single person complain about that because the United States Congress has basically become his little minion. We basically have a political minority trying to cling to power via any means they can. Any means they can. And when that happens, when you have a political minority clinging to power, you have a U.S. Supreme Court that won't stand up, then other people start to have taking actions. That's one of the reasons we have state legislatures, and one of the reasons we have the 10th Amendment, which says our states have some independence. And when we have the ability to do something, we have to consider what our options are. Now, I found it interesting, and I'll talk about the options just here in a second, but I really found interesting was the thought that this sort of that what we're here for doing this week is somehow unprecedented. In 2013, I guess that's now 22 years ago, I was on the other side of the building. I remember I was sitting there one day because in January 21st of 2013, and I read that something was going on over in this chamber. It turned out that Henry Marsh, whose name we've already heard today, a veteran civil rights attorney, decided to take a trip to Washington, D.C., because he wanted to see our nation's first black president sworn into office a second time. And this body happened to be 2020 at the time. And instead of honoring that civil rights warrior, Henry Marsh, that person who's the institution of this chamber, the chairman of the courts committee at the time, I believe, instead of honoring his personal devotion to go see the president and acknowledging that was just a one-time thing, some people on the other side of the aisle decided to put in an amendment completely redrawing this chamber's boundaries. My recollection is it drew something like 5 or 6 Democratic seats and Republican seats. It would have given the current minority, something like a 10-seat majority in this chamber. And I just find it fascinating to listen to the finger-pointing going on at that time. Sorry, the finger-pointing going on today, given what happened back then. And what was driving that? Was American democracy, Virginia democracy at stake? Was the future of our country at stake when that happened? No, it was just a petty political power grab. That's all it was. That is all it was. It had nothing to do with the future of our country and our democracy. And what you have in front of you, or what you'll have in front of you, you'll see the text this afternoon. does not get rid of the commission that was passed a couple years ago. There's no maps that have been drawn. There's no repeal of the constitutional amendment. The only thing that's on the table, or will be on the table later this week, is giving the General Assembly the option to take further action in January to then give Virginia voters the option of protecting our country depending on what happens over the next 2 months. There's other states that are taking action. One just happened yesterday. One just got called back into special session yesterday. There's other states that might take action in the next 2 months. Right now, this just gives us the option of taking further action in January if it becomes necessary to protect our country. That's all it does. Madam President, voters in other states, at least the polls show, are willing to take that action because they're so terrified about what's happening in America today. And all I can tell the body right now is wait and see. We'll see how it goes. But should it become necessary in January, then we will consider taking action in this extraordinary step because it's necessary to protect America. And I think protecting democracy in this country is probably the most important reason we could be here today, or the most important reason that we could take any action. I hope people will see through the partisanship and realize that the future of America is more important than any kind of minor partisan concerns they might have this time. Thank you, Madam President.
The senator from King George, Senator Stewart.
Thank you, Madam President. Rise for a point of personal privilege.
The senator has the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I listened to my friend from Eastern Fairfax, and I use that word friend genuinely because I honestly think the world of him. Smart guy, works hard, all of the great adjectives. But I'm trying to figure out if we're in the same world or not today. Because I listened to the senator, and it sounds like he's talking about a third world country other than the greatest nation in the earth that we all live in today. He is bashing a president that has ended wars, solved problems, bringing our manufacturers back to this country faster than anybody I've ever seen in the history of presidents since I've been paying attention. And yet democracy is on the verge of collapsing. And I just don't know what that means. I've not seen any threat to democracy. I heard the word king. And I would remind the senator that if he was a king, he would be beheaded for what he just said. But in this country, we enjoy free speech. We get to say what we want to say, and that is a valued right and privilege. And only kings stop you from talking. So far as I know, he hadn't tried to stop anybody from talking. We attack a governor. Now Glenn Youngkin had a great life, and he sacrificed it to come here and work for the citizens of Virginia because he felt that was the right thing to do. And I commend him and applaud him for doing that. He didn't have to do it. He didn't need a job. He had a great one. He had a great life. And to besmirch him and everything that he's done for this Commonwealth, in my mind, is unconscionable. And this is what worries me, Madam President. We now are devolving into personal attacks of our president and our governor, and we should never go there. This is the sort of thing that divides us and creates such vitriol that we're going to lose the civility that I was taught was so important in this body. And finally, the senator from Hampton, whom I've learned so much from, illustrated exactly what worries me about this. Virginia is now a political pawn for Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer to try to redraw congressional lines to make a difference in D.C. We're not Texas. We're not North Carolina, nor should we act like them. We are part of the oldest legislative body in the country. And we should be different and we should be better. The senator from Franklin mentioned this, but I'll never forget when I came in, Senator Saslaw and Senator Whipple, and they taught us, because I came into a Senate that was controlled by the Democrats, and I heard about the Virginia way, and I heard about putting our partisan differences aside. And I believed in that, and I still believe in it today. But when you allow this body to become a political pawn of D.C., then we've lost something that we're never going to get back. And I hope you all give that a lot of thought.
The senators are reminded that during the time of personal privilege, there is to be no movement, and the conversations must be kept to a low roar. Thank you. The senator from Hanover, Senator McDougal.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, rise for a point of personal privilege.
The senator may continue.
Madam President, listen to the conversation, and the thing I thought about are what lessons I like to teach Reagan. One of those is, he who's without sin should cast the first stone. All of us, by our nature, and in this case, specifically redistricting, have sin. We've all done it. Senator from Fairfax referenced 2013. That came after 2012, when my seatmate was drawn in with multiple other Republicans. His seat was gone in a partisan maneuver in this body. Then the next year, in a partisan maneuver in this body, we tried to undo that. Those were both partisan maneuvers. They were both people, both sides, Republicans and Democrats, trying to get a political advantage in this body. Now, in the first one, it succeeded. Senator Stanley lost his seat. Where he lived was no longer in his district. He ended up running against then Senator Roscoe Reynolds, and in a very close and very expensive race, he won, and that changed the makeup of this body. But, Madam President, in the next year, when that political maneuver was taken, it went down the hall, and the then Republican Speaker, Bill Howe, said, we're not going to take it up. And a Republican killed that maneuver. So it didn't move forward. But as we're talking about redistricting, there are countless examples, countless, where people's districts have been moved, where they live has had to change, the people that were in their community have changed. It's been about partisanship. We've all done it. I see some of my friends across the aisle nodding their head. It's happened to everybody in this room. Madam President, we made a decision that we're not going to do that. Some people referred to those practices as lying, as cheating, as stealing. But it was politics. Everybody was trying to get the partisan advantage. But then we said, let's do it differently. Let's try to take that partisanship out of play. It was a hard-fought battle in the House and the Senate. But that bill passed this body 38-2. If memory serves me right, there was one Republican and one Democrat that voted against it. I think I saw a partisan senator raise their hand indicating that he voted against that bipartisan, people-drawn way. But it went to the voters, and 2.7 million Virginians said, we want to take that partisanship out of this process. And that's what we did. We came up with the Redistricting Commission. Now, Madam President, at that time, I did not ask to be put on the redistricting commission. I actually asked not to be put on it, and I was sentenced to that duty. It was the most excruciating, painful experience I have had in the legislature. It absolutely was. It was the most stressful. It was the most aggressive. And in that process, we fought about what those districts should be. I remember things a little bit differently than my colleague from Hampton. I remember some of my friends that were appointed from the House coming and saying, if we don't get this percentage seats, we're not agreeing. The percentage seats on the Senate, where there had to be a minimum of 23 Democratic Senate seats. And on the House, if I recall correctly, it had to be a minimum of 54 Democratic House seats for them to agree. I was not going to vote for that. I said, let's make a number of those seats in play so that they have to be contested. And we went back and forth, and the final offer there was said, let's wait till after the gubernatorial election that Governor Youngkin was running in, and let's look at the numbers after that and come up with a direction. And at that point, one of the Democratic citizen members decided that they did not want to continue forward, and the commission kind of dissolved, and it went to the court. I got to tell you, I disagree with my seatmate. I didn't love how the court drew the districts. I didn't love the special masters that they picked. I thought it was more partisan on y'all's side of the direction than it should have been. But it was one that took our partisanship out of it. We make a decision that the Supreme Court sets, and they tried to come up with a solution for all Virginians. They weren't worried about where I lived. They were not worried about the communities that I wanted to represent. They were not worried about how many counties I had to go to, how far I had to drive. They were trying to come up with districts for all of Virginia. And Madam President, even though I didn't love it, I'd say it worked pretty darn good. We've had contested elections in this body. Those contested elections are ones that some were pretty close. We've had contested elections in the House. Some of those seats were pretty close. And on the congressional level, it's relatively split according to how the votes have lined up. Now, certainly we can say they're doing this or that in another state. And on our side, they point to Rhode Island, and they point to Massachusetts, they point to New York, and they point to Illinois, all states that have pretty much eliminated meaningful Republican representation in Congress. Some of them got rid of it altogether. And then on y'all's side, you point to Texas, you point to Indiana, point to North Carolina and say, look at the horrible things they're doing. That's why we have this bipartisan redistricting commission, so we don't do that. Because we can fight this back and forth. We did it for decades. It started with Patrick Henry and James Madison. They hated each other. And so Patrick Henry decided he was going to get rid of James Madison. And he came darn close. Just think of what the country would have been different if that had not worked. And if I recall, we call it gerrymandering because there was a member of Congress named Jerry. He created this. Maybe our academic high school teacher can beef us up on the history close to that. But Madam President, we're talking about what Virginians do now. All this stuff is going on in other places. Again, as it's been said, they're lying, they're cheating, they're stealing elsewhere. But we don't have to do it here. I'd always tell Reagan, I said, somebody could be doing the exact same thing that you're doing. That doesn't make it right. This is not right. Madam President, I asked yesterday, could we even see the legislation that the members are talking about? It is clear from what we heard just said during points of personal privilege that somebody's seen it, somebody knows about it, but we know who does not know? Virginians. Virginians do not know. They have no idea. They haven't seen it. And now on the schedule, We're going to come in tomorrow at 10 o'clock. We're going to come in tomorrow at 11 o'clock. The House is going to come in at 10. They're going to introduce a bill. They're going to come in at noon. They're going to introduce a bill shortly after noon. It's going to come here. And my guess is we're not going to wait for Virginians to even see what it is. There's going to be a committee meeting called around 1 o'clock. So between 12 and 1 o'clock, something that's going to change the Constitution of Virginia is going to be introduced. And not a single Virginian outside of a couple in this body and a couple in the body down the way have even seen it, won't have access to it. Well, guess what, Madam President? Most Virginians are actually working tomorrow. And so the fact that we're going to be asked to vote on that in committee and they haven't even had the opportunity to see it, that doesn't sound like the example we're trying to set. That sounds like we're trying to jam something through. So, Madam President, as we look at this, the senator from Fairfax is right. The partisanship existed, and it was on both sides. We changed that. This body changed that. We should not go back.
The senator from Arlington, Senator Favola.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise on a point of personal privilege.
The senator may continue.
Thank you, Madam President. I just think we should start with a context of facts that we can all agree on, because I'm not quite sure where some of these concepts were coming from. So let's just start with what we know. The one big, beautiful bill passed. It was a bill that President Trump and the Republican majority in Congress embraced, advocated for, and passed into law. Many, many Virginians were harmed by that bill or will be harmed by that bill. There have been numerous news articles talking about the cuts to Medicaid, especially the Medicaid expansion program. Let me remind you, 700,000 Virginians receive Medicaid expansion, and we receive a federal match for it. Thousands of Virginians are receiving SNAP benefits. As we sit here, notices have gone out to the Departments of Social Services telling them to stop enrolling SNAP recipients. That's real harm. We are in a shutdown situation because the Democrats are standing up and saying we must extend the tax credits that are available on the health marketplace so individuals can afford their insurance, health insurance. This is not going unnoticed by the Virginians we represent. I know there are food banks in every single jurisdiction in this Senate. And I also know that nearly every one of us has received emails from folks saying, please, help individuals who are working hard day in and day out, trying to meet their rent, trying to pay their health care, and they need food stamps. They need to be able to put food on the table. They're scared. They're nervous. Their economic security is at great risk. Now, each one of us knows if you don't like the decisions being made by decision makers, you should have the opportunity to change those decision makers. That's the context for what we're talking about today. 1. 2, what we are talking about is a process. There is nothing we are going to do today that will overrule what has happened in the past in terms of our nonpartisan redistricting. Whatever we start today is just the beginning. Just the beginning. It would have to pass again after this election in 2026, and eventually it would have to go to the voters. So we are not doing any magical wand that'll change the districts as we know it today. That is not going to happen. We are opening up an option. Ultimately, it will be the voters in Virginia who will decide. But one of the reasons, and the main reason, we are even being asked to do this by constituents, by the way, is because they want a voice. What's going on in Congress right now is leaving most of Virginians out in the cold. So I think we need to think about not just the academic exercise of redistricting, what it means and what happened in the past, but what's going on today in people's real lives. So I ask you to consider a process that in fact may allow Virginians to have another tool, another voice in how they're governed. Thank you, Madam President.
The senator from Lynchburg. Senator Peake.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
The senator may say on.
Thank you, Madam President. First, I have several points of personal privilege to make. First, I agree with almost everything that the senator from Rocky Mount said. But, Madam Clerk, I do want to tell you that we know you are not responsible for the person that the senator from Rocky Mount is, even though he gave you lots of credit for his upbringing. But to the senator from Eastern Fairfax, who spoke about the state of our democracy, I have these things to say. Fortunately, we are now coming up on the 250th anniversary of this great democracy that was started here in the Commonwealth of Virginia by our founding fathers, our great patriots, Patrick Henry, Thomas Jefferson, George Wythe, James Madison. Democracy, elections, and electoral college. We have a presidential election every 4 years. And the citizens of the country vote in that election, and they elect a president. They also elect congressmen, and they elect senators at those exact same times. Fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, the Democratic Party has nominated woefully horrible candidates in 2016 and 2024. They were known to be highly unpopular at the time they received the nominations. Your candidate in 2020 was an octogenarian who frequently didn't know where he was. And it was posted on Fox News every single day. So anyone who didn't watch MSNBC knew that he was cognitively impaired. He fell on the stage numerous times in June of 2022, and y'all pretended like it didn't happen. And you let him continue to run for president until that disastrous debate, which was very similar to Abigail Spanberger's debate with Madam President. Finally, at that debate, you picked a new candidate with 121 days to go without any democratic process whatsoever. And the current president won an overwhelming majority in the Electoral College, and he won the popular vote by over 4 million or 5 million votes. That is called democracy. That is what we have. And the Republicans won the Senate, and they won the House of Congress. We will have another election next year, and it will be time for the citizens to vote. But we are going under a democracy right now. And that's where we stand. As to the senator who spoke about Medicare and ACA, the Democrats have shut down the federal government by refusing to pass a CR. This is the exact same bill, a continuation of the bill that they voted for in March. They have known for 5 years that the Medicaid and ACA subsidies were going to be ending on November 21st or in December. Why did they wait until 2 months ago or a month ago to shut the government down? Because Chuck Schumer is in really, really bad shape against AOC, and that's why they have done it. They've known for 5 years. Why didn't they do something last year? Why didn't they do something in March? Why are we shut down? Why are our 2 Democratic senators voting to shut down the government? Our governor, who was maligned earlier today, has established a state of emergency so that people who will not be getting SNAP benefits will get SNAP benefits. Where's the appreciation for that? I thank the governor for doing that. We have a major task in front of us. We have a process for amending the Constitution. You propose the bills. It goes in front of our body. People know what it is. People weigh in with their legislators about whether or not they like that constitutional amendment. And then when their legislators vote one way or the other on that constitutional amendment, we have an intervening election. And if they don't like the way they voted, they can vote against those people. But that is not the process we are undertaking this week, because over 1 million people have already voted, and we don't even know what the constitutional amendment is. I can't wait to find out. I'm sure I'll be thrilled. When do we get it? What's it going to say? Like the rest of the 8 million people in the Commonwealth, we can't wait to see. Unfortunately, for a huge majority of us, it will be too late to vote for our House of Delegate member based on what they did on this constitutional amendment. That's the travesty. That's what's disgraceful about what is going on today. Thank you, Madam President.
The senator from Western Henrico, Senator Van Valkenburg.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I rise for a point of personal privilege.
The senator has the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I pushed my button to speak because I decided I wanted to play my part in ensuring all 40 of us speak today. And I realized if I didn't contribute to that, it would just be 39. But all kidding aside, the senator from Hanover asked for it, so to fact-check him, it's Eldridge Gary. He was the governor of Massachusetts, and you actually can't draw a Republican district in Massachusetts. Go look at the math. It's pretty stunning, actually, so it's not gerrymandered. I'm not going to talk about the amendment today. I thought we were saving that debate for Friday, so I was getting my speech ready for Friday, so it's not ready for today. Sorry to depress everybody on that count. And I don't want to talk about federal politics at all, because we're just going to go back and forth on that. But I do think, and the reason why I'm up, is I do think that the senator from King William, Prince George, King George, raised a point that's worth talking about. He talked about how popular the president is, and he talked about all the things that the president is doing well. I couldn't disagree more with him, but the whole point of elections is that we have a referenda on how the president's doing. Do you agree with the tariffs or not? Do you agree with firing all the workers in Virginia or not? Do you agree with DOGE causing chaos in our state or not? Do you agree with ripping people's health care away from them or doubling their premiums or not? Do you agree with sending the National Guard into cities or not? We vote on those things. And if the president, if what he was doing was as popular as the senator implied, our current president wouldn't have a problem running it back next November. But instead, what he's doing is he's going to the states where he has allies, and he's saying quite explicitly, change the maps to make them better because I can't win. Because we can't win. And since we can't win because our policies are unpopular and are hurting people, we must change the maps. Why else would he be doing it? Why else would he do something that is so outside a constitutional norm? He's doing it because he can't win on the ideas, because his policies are hurting people, particularly the people of this state. And so when we're talking about how can we ensure that Virginians have a voice in ensuring that the pain stops, that the prices go down, not up, that they have health care, they don't get it ripped away, that they have a job, they don't just get arbitrarily fired at any random time, that a National Guard's not going into their town, that people aren't being ripped out of their homes. Donald Trump doesn't want the people of Virginia to be able to have a say. And that's why he's going to Texas and Missouri and North Carolina and Indiana and asking them to change seats. That's why we are here today. So all this other conversation, which has gone, as it always does in this body, goes everywhere except for where it really needs to be. The key point is this. The president's ideas are unpopular. He knows it. He's going to his ideological friends. He's asking them to carve up maps. And now the other side is upset because they're going to get called on it in elections. And so I'm sorry. That's what this is actually about right now. That's what this is about. I'll have my better speech on Friday. But I wanted to make sure that we were all aware of why we're actually here. Thank you, Madam President.
The senator from Prince Edward. Senator Cyphers.
Madam President, I rise for a point of personal privilege.
The senator has the floor.
Madam President, I, as the most junior member of this body, I lack the eloquence or the history or the experience of my colleagues. But, Madam President, I would submit that I came to this body with the lens of the average voter. And what I would like to say to my colleagues is that for many of us out there, we feel like voters have went from being represented to being pawns in power struggles. And Madam President, the things that are going on here this week, for me and for a lot of the people in my district, they feel very much that way. I grew up very humble out in the woods of Amelia County, but my dad was a decent and honest and practical man, and more than anything else, he was a wise man. And one of the things that my father taught me is that in life, two wrongs don't make a right, and if you pursue that line of reasoning, it's a race to the bottom. I've heard a lot of discussion about what's going on nationally, and I know that my voters elected me to represent them, and I know that this body is here to represent Virginia. I can't say everything that's going on nationally, but what I do know is that it didn't start this year. There are many states that have been gerrymandering for some time where voters in those states are underrepresented because the bodies followed this path of a race to the bottom because someone else did something wrong, so now we're going to do something wrong, so now we're going to do something wrong. And I would submit that this Virginia way that I keep hearing about, that maybe we should be holding ourselves to a higher standard than that. And to that end, Madam President, if we're a state legislative body, what are we doing to our core responsibilities when we reduce ourselves to pinch hitters for the power brokers in Washington? If we're not looking out for the people of Virginia, if we're not looking out for our Constitution and the way that things are supposed to go, who else is going to do that? We're the only people that can do that on behalf of our voters. And Madam President, in these other states where things are going on that people in this body disagree with, we don't have a vote in those states. We don't have the ability to influence what's going on in those states. We have the ability to influence what's going on here. But this idea that Virginia is subordinate to the things that are going on in national politics, it reminds me a little bit of us tying our own energy policy, for example, to that of California. At some point in time, let's let Virginia be Virginia. And let's look out for the people that elected us. And instead of following the lead of others, particularly when it is a race to the bottom, maybe we should stand up and lead into what should be the race to the future that we all say that we want, which is a future where our voters are represented and where everybody in this country is treated like equals. Undermining and pigeonholing sectors and districts for the sake of gaining power in Washington is nowhere in the oath that I took. And I don't think it's in the oath that anyone in this body took. And Madam President, we talk a lot about the balance of power, and when we talk about that, we always talk about that in terms of government. But my understanding is, and again, as a very junior member of this body, and I welcome the opportunity to stand corrected, but my understanding is the way the constitutional amendment process works, the purpose of the intervening election is so that voters are part of that balance of power, so that they're not happy with the direction that their legislators took in a first vote, that they would have the opportunity to promote them back to citizens before the next vote. And Madam President, we have almost 1 million people in the Commonwealth that have voted. And they voted without the knowledge of this this maneuver that's happening here this week, and how we can say that we're representing our state and our state's interests when we've got 1 million people that do not have the ability to exercise their constitutional right and duty. I don't understand that at all. This feels a lot like the things that me and the other millions of Americans out in small town America are just tired of. Madam President, the last thing I'd like to say is it's easy to do the right thing when everything is going our way. But it's really tough to stand up and do the right thing when you see an opportunity in front of you that can get you the end results that you want, particularly when you have the justification, well, someone else did something just as bad or worse. But I would submit, Madam President, that we should be, in this body, we should be holding ourselves to a higher standard. Because once again, if we are not here to represent the people of Virginia, who is going to? Thank you, Madam President.
The senator from Roanoke, Senator Suderline.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
The senator has the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Like the senator from Henrico, I too want to do my part today in the 40 for 40. And I was very disappointed that we got to hear from our majority leader, who's an avid baseball fan, and he talked about all that was wrong in the world, but did not point out that we got 2 World Series games for the price of 1 last night, 18 innings. And so I apologize now that as someone who woke themselves up in the 13th and 15th and 17th innings to stay awake, I'll try to be as short as I can. Yes, gerrymandering was gerrymandering. I misspoke in high school over and over again because I always tried to say it the way that I learned it in my history class. But just like the senator from Hanover pointed out, that too started in Virginia because it happened here first. Massachusetts was about 20 years behind Virginia, and that is not something for us to be proud of, but that's in part why Virginia has such an important role in fixing it, and why it was so great that 5 years ago we came together to fix it. And also, like the senator from Henrico, I imagine I'll have a lot more to say about that later this week. But hearing that it's so critical that we have elections this November is exactly right. And I look to our friend from Lynchburg. Between us, we used to have the senator from Virginia Beach. She's running some pretty contentious congressional races down there in Virginia 2nd, and I think 6 people have already announced against her. We're very much going to have congressional races this year, and I have a feeling a lot of attention is going to be on Virginia's congressional races under the regular course of action. Unfortunately, what we're talking about, which again, we don't know what it will look like, and I think we really wouldn't know what it looks like until spring, but that actually seeks to undermine elections altogether from what's been discussed on the internet, and that's incredibly disappointing. And what's also disappointing to hear is that voters are going to have a role on this. Before the senator from Franklin got to represent all of his home county, I used to get to represent parts of it, and I got to represent most of it, actually. And in there was a town of Boone's Mill, which is not very big. Most people know it because they get a speeding ticket there. Their elections were in May. They liked having their council elections in May. And Salem, which I got to represent before and still get to represent, their council elections were in May. And they liked not being on the ballot with the president and being able to focus so much more on local issues. Now, I can tell you, I pointed out at the time, moving Salem's elections from May to November was going to have a partisan benefit for the Republicans. Republicans had not had seats on council before. Now they've got 2. And there's a good chance it's going to continue growing on that 5-seat board as those elections are so much more partisan now than they were 5 years ago. But we were told that it was so critical, it was worth adding the more partisan elections in November because not enough people voted in May. And now I hear that we're going to let the voters decide something that they decided on the same day Virginia voted for President Biden in 2020 with massive turnout on a 2-to-1 margin, voted for a redistricting commission. Well, we're just starting a process that maybe in April or May. We don't you'll find out when you find out, we're going to ask voters to come vote then. And it's not okay for towns or cities that have had a 100-year tradition of voting then. Everyone knew to vote then. But we're going to change the Constitution. We're envisioning changing the Constitution that way. And I think that's incredibly disappointing. And I hope that's not what we'll do. And I think we're going to get to talk about that a lot more later this week. Thank you, Madam President. And I'll tell everyone else, if you missed last night's 18 innings, Shohei Ohtani is going to pitch tonight after going 4 for 4 and reaching base all 9 times last night. So not all is bad in the world for our majority leader. Thank you, Madam President.
Is there any other business to come before the Senate? The clerk will report any announcements on the desk.
We do not have any announcements, Madam President.
The senator from Portsmouth, Senator Lucas.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move that the Senate do now adjourn until 11 a.m. tomorrow.
Madam President.
For what purpose does the senator from Virginia Beach rise?
Rise for an announcement.
An announcement?
Yes, ma'am.
Senator.
No.
The senator may continue.
Thank you, Madam President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, also, Madam President, I know you are of Jamaican descent. There's a Category 5 hurricane heading for Jamaica, should have made landfall earlier today. So if you have family or loved ones in the Caribbean or in Jamaica, please wish them well and be on the lookout because they will need help after this Category 5 storm passed through. So, Madam President, I hope your loved ones and family are safe. Thank you.
I thank the senator. Again, Madam President Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, again, I move that the Senate do now adjourn until 11 a.m. tomorrow.
The question is, shall the Senate adjourn until 11 a.m. tomorrow? Those in favor of that motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. The Senate stands adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow.
Senate chamber. Did you know that you can watch the Senate live on YouTube? Visit the channel by browsing to youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. That's youtube.com/@Senate of Virginia. This is the Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Senate Chamber.